Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today to learn how to build your brand as part of the I2C Founder Fundamental Series. We are thrilled that you're joining us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you may be. If you're on a run at the gym or just hanging out, driving in your car, whatever, we're just excited that you joined us today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to build your brand, tell your story, and also build a following. So some brands elevate their brand identity to an art. If you think of companies such as Apple or Lego or even some clothing lines like Levi's, some other brands make it their entry into the playing field. And some struggle because they don't really know who they are or they don't know how to communicate it effectively. So one thing is for sure, if you want to be competitive and successful, you have to craft a strong brand identity. It's critical to your success. When you can successfully communicate who you are, you can also better communicate with people and form the strong relationships that you need for long-term success. So we're going to cover that today during this session, but not only are we going to cover how to develop your brand from scratch, but we're also going to include tips around whether or not your current branding strategy could use a potential refresh or not. So stick around and thanks for joining us. So first things first, kudos to you for taking part in this podcast. We are, as I mentioned, we're very excited that you're here. Obviously, you're looking to beef up those branding skills, so we're going to help you do that today. And just a little bit about us. My name is Nivens Tannett, and I founded Flourish in 2018 with the premise of helping businesses find ways to establish long-term growth paths. So we are a full-service strategic marketing and public relations company based in Huntsville, Alabama, and we've been in business for a little over 3 years, and we absolutely love what we do. We get to partner with businesses of all sizes in a variety of different industries and help them create their strategic growth paths, and then we implement those strategies on their behalf. So we have a lot of fun at what we do, and we're very thankful for the I2C over at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. They're doing amazing things for the startup ecosystem, so if you haven't checked out their resources, please be sure that you do. So I'm going to start off with this quote because I think it's really important from Jeff Bezos. You know, he's kind of familiar, a little bit successful, but he says your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think this is really important because, you know, your brand is something that is really your reputation, your identity, who you are as not only as an individual, but as a company, especially as a company. So when you think about Coca-Cola, what do you think about? And when you think about the NFL or Pizza Hut or Mountain Dew or Taco Bell, all of these big name brands, think about how they make you feel and what you think about them. That's in essence their brand identity that they've worked really, really hard to achieve. And unfortunately, some negative things can also occur that can, you know, do some negative things to your brand, but this is something where you've got some control over and you really want to pour your heart and soul into it as you start to build this out. So, you know, having a strong brand can really help you with a couple different things. It can really help elevate your message based on what it is that you're focused on as an individual or a company. Obviously, it strengthens your organization, not only on the outside, but on the inside as well. When your team and your employees and your key stakeholders really understand the brand identity and understand the story behind who you are and why you are the way that you are as a company, they have a vested interest in seeing you succeed. It also helps to broaden your network, where you can be able to network with a variety of different people, gain market equity by building up that awareness and really aligning your brand with that area of expertise that you are focused in, which allows you to become the status quo. And it also allows you to unveil new clients, customers, partners, and of course, as we all need, new avenues for monetization. So we're going to start with a couple brands right off the bat that I want to highlight because I think that for the most part, everybody will really recognize who these individuals are. Obviously, we have Oprah, the queen of all things, Richard Branson in the middle, and then one of my favorites, Gary Vaynerchuk. Now, each of these have done a very, very good job at establishing their brand. Now, granted, these are personal brands, but within these personal brands are also corporate brands. that are associated with who these individuals are, what they stand for, how they behave, what they talk about, what they align their values with. And so each of them have a very, very different brand identity, but everything that they do is really focused around that brand and helps to reinforce that brand. So again, thinking about what other people think about you when you're not in the room, these are three really good examples of how that can actually come to fruition when you do a good job at it. So what do these brands have in common? Well, first things first, they align with a purpose. They're known for something and have built a career around the core message that they're trying to promote. And you also recognize them. They're very well-known individuals that you can pretty much find anywhere. So you think about Oprah, you can find her through her various websites, on TV, through a podcast, in magazines, on social media, at speaking engagements when she actually goes out and about and speaks to large groups. So they have a very familiar face. You can find them everywhere. And again, they align themselves with a very strong brand identity. And then very much so, on the right-hand side, people look to them for information. So they become reputable, dependable, and they're sought after and viewed as a subject matter expert in their respective fields. So Gary Vaynerchuk, I love him. And one of the things that I immediately align him and his brand with is entrepreneurship, because he gives great advice around entrepreneurship and starting a business and how to manage the hustle. And he just gives a lot of great inspiration. So people will look to him for guidance around these particular things. So what we're going to do is jump into an exercise of how you can actually create your own brand. So one thing that I just want to highlight is that your brand is so much more than a logo. The definition of branding is the outward expression of a brand, including its trademark, name, communications, and visual appearance. A brand identity is really sort of the sum total of how your brand looks, feels, and speaks to people. And sometimes that even includes how it sounds, how it tastes, how it feels, and honestly, even how it smells. Think of the Westin Hotel, you guys. If you've ever stayed at a Westin Hotel, you know that the second you walk into a Westin property, it has that beautiful scent that is permeated throughout the entire facility. I found out the other day what that is, so I'm totally hooked and I'm going to go get it. But you can also, your brand also resonates down to the scent. So this slide is really, really important because I want to, again, reinforce that a logo is so much more than, or your brand is so much more than just a logo. It has to translate across so many different things. So when you think about your brand and you think about what that means, it's not only just that logo, but it's how you represent yourself on your website, how you portray your brand and your subject matter expertise in video and photography, what type of colors you use to represent your brand. There's all these different things that really encompass what a brand is, and it's so much more than just your logo. So I really think it's important to highlight that your brand really, really needs to be distinct, memorable, scalable and flexible, cohesive, and easy to apply. So think about those things: distinct, memorable, scalable, flexible, cohesive, and easy to apply. Those are all of the things that you want to think about when you're developing your brand. All right, so let's jump into how to actually develop your brand. So first things first, step number one, I want you guys to identify your purpose. Why do you exist? Of course, you can take this and it can be applicable to not only your personal brand, but also your corporate brand as well. So what I've done here is I've listed out a couple different purposes behind some big name brands that you probably recognize. So Column 5's vision, they kind of have their vision and purpose together, where they talk about how they exist to help people build a future where everyone can live healthy and fulfilled lives. So I love that. So this is who they are, this is why they exist, and this is what their purpose is. I love Casper's 2 mattresses. They say, we believe sleep is the superpower that charges everything people do. I love that so much because this is who we are, this is what we believe in, and this is what we want to accomplish. So first things first, you've got to figure out your purpose. either as an individual or as a corporation. What are you here to do? And what are you here to determine and figure out that way you can solve a problem for your customers? Next, you really want to nail your vision. So what sort of future do you want to help create? And so here, taking some of these, again, previously from when we were talking about your purpose, Casper, their vision, we are here to awaken the potential of a well-rested world. So the purpose of why you're here and what it is that you're trying to do. I love Alzheimer's Association. It's simple but to the point. They want to create a world without Alzheimer's disease, period. That's backs up everything that they do as an organization, which I love so much. I love Uber's vision as well. Smarter transportation with fewer cars and greater access. Transportation that's safer, cheaper, and more reliable. Transportation that creates more job opportunities and higher incomes for drivers. I love this so much. They are flat out saying this is what we want to achieve, this is what we are going to achieve, and this is what we are offering to people who take part in our brand. So nail your vision. Figure out what future you want to create and how do you plan to go about doing it. You also want to define your mission. What are you here to do, and how do you actually create that future? So again, going back to Casper, we're setting a new standard in sleep innovation. So right off the bat, you're saying what it is that we are going to do, what fuels our efforts each and every day. Tesla, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Nike, do everything possible to expand the human potential. And I love Yetis, build the cooler you'd use every day if it existed. That is so straight to the point, but it's so true. They're like, if you could create the ultimate product and use it every single day, what would that be? It fits everything that a consumer might be looking for in a cooler that where they're really wanting to keep things super cold or keep things super hot, no matter what the environment is. And that's exactly what their mission, spells out for them as a company, which I love. Now, this one, the last piece of this is that you want to build your values. So think about it this way. How will we conduct ourselves in support and pursuit of our mission, vision, and purpose? So you want to think about your values as something that your team, your employees, your stakeholders, your board members, everybody really, really believes in. And this is what should help drive your effort each and every day. So column 5, as a company, we want to do good work, value our partners, be good to each other, be humble, and experiment often. So you can see how they've elaborated on each of those sections individually, but this is really what sits at the core of this company. I love Whole Foods. Number 1, we satisfy and delight our customers. We promote team member growth and happiness. We care about our communities and the environment, and we practice win-win partnerships with our suppliers. So think about your values as these little reminders to your team, both internally and externally, about who we are, what we represent, and what sits at the core of everything that we do as a company. Okay, so once you've got the values and the purpose and the mission and the vision figured out, that's really your internal process that you want to focus on. Once you've done that, you want to actually start looking outward. So there's outside variables that really need to play a part in what this looks like as far as building your brand. So now that you've developed kind of those core branding elements, you want to kind of step outside and consider these factors. So first things first, you have got to know who your competitors are. You need to know who you're up against. That way you can differentiate yourself as much as possible. The last thing you want to do is to develop a brand and a logo that looks like someone else, especially someone you're competing against. You've got to be your own company and showcase those amazing skills and services that you have to offer. So you want to know how you're different, how you're similar. There's a whole competitive analysis that you can go through from a marketing perspective that will really, really lend some great insight into this process. But from a branding perspective, you've got to know what that environment looks like, who you're up against. That way you can create a brand identity that is very, very strong and allows you to stand outside from those competitors. Secondly, when you're looking outward, you want to identify and define who your target audience is. What are their pain points? how do you want them to feel about your brand? You guys, I can't tell you how many customers that we talk to that are at the early stages of building their companies, and they really don't know who their customer is. They say they do, but when you really start to peel back the layers and dig deep into what those customers are really all about, what they care about, what their demographic is, what are the core pain points that they have as a consumer, and how does your product or service actually, help them achieve their goals? You've got to know what those things are, because all of those things play a role into what your brand identity should be. It should start with the customer. If it doesn't, and it starts with something else, you need to make sure that you feel really, really confident about what that something else is. Because ultimately, your brand and your logo and your brand identity is what's going to be the face of your company. So think about your customer. Also, you want to think about what your brand voice is. So I love this. There's a lot of exercises you can go through, from a logo perspective, but you want to think about how you want others to describe your brand. Do you want to be fun, sassy, super conservative, down to earth? Do you want to have a really kind of quirky sense of humor? You need to think about how you want that brand voice to be represented. And again, how do you want people to feel about your brand? Do you want them to feel empowered? Do you want them to feel as though they're in a trusting relationship? Do you want them to feel as though you have this long-standing, credibility in the market, and so you have something a bit more conservative and safe? Or do you want to be something a little bit more edgy and kind of think outside the box and a little bit more playful? So those are things that you want to think about, because all of those are influences on how your brand identity comes together. And then a couple things just to ask yourself. I love this. What celebrity do you want your brand to emulate? I think this is a really fun question to ask, because based on your answer, that can really help influence what some of that brand identity really, really looks like. Also, what do you want to avoid being known for or known as? So if oftentimes you find that people are confused about who you are as a company or what your service offering is, you really need to think about that, because there could be some ways that you can influence your brand identity based on some of those misconceptions. And then also, how do we want to talk about ourselves? So how do you want to talk about your company? Are you the most credible accounting source in your area? Are you someone who has such a unique skill set or talent that nobody else has? Are you someone that is a great complement or business partner to another company? So all of those types of things can really influence what this looks like. Okay, so now for the fun part. Let's talk about the design. Now, this is really what will drive so much of your marketing efforts and really become, as I mentioned before, the face of your company. There are so many types of logos too, from word and brand marks to like mascots and emblems and symbols. There's all sorts of things. But a logo is really used to provide an identity to your company. It identifies, bottom line, that's what it is. One thing that I will share with you guys is that you've probably seen at the beginning of this presentation, our company Flourish. So our Flourish logo is a tree. And the reason why we wanted to use a tree was because we wanted people to think about growth when they think about our company. We are strategic growth partners in that we work with businesses of all sizes to develop growth plans that will help them get from point A to point B to point C and beyond. And we do that through strategic marketing, communications, public relations, and digital strategy. So we really want people to think about growth when they think about our company. All right, so there's a couple different steps that you can take to develop a logo. There's a variety of different things that you can do here, but we've kind of refined this list down to 5 core things. There's a little bit of rhyming here, but it's discover, explore, design, refine, and define, and we'll kind of talk through each of them. So first things first, before you develop a logo, you really want to think about, why do you need a logo? If it's a new logo, do you need one? And what's the purpose of this design? What do you want this design to look like? What's the meaning or story behind it? Again, going back to Flourish, when people see that tree, they think about growth. They think about Flourish. They think about something that is thriving and doing so in a very successful way. So think about what the story is behind your company and how you can emulate that through a design. Again, who are your target audiences? This is really important because you want to think about what sort of logo and design will resonate with the audience that you are trying to target. If your audience happens to be a demographic that is over the age of 60, you don't want to use something that has a ton of bright, bold colors and maybe really hard to understand. It needs to be a little bit more simplified and conservative. Whereas vice versa, if you're looking to target a much younger audience, you need to have a design and logo mark that really will resonate with that demographic. So you want to do something that's a little bit more bold and a little bit more innovative and a little bit more catchy than what you would if you were marketing your business to a demographic that's a little bit older. And again, who are your main competitors? You want to make sure that you're not falling in line with everybody else and that you're able to stand alone and be differentiated. What are your goals? How will the success be measured? And what are your 3 to 5 top brand role models? You want to think about some companies and some logos and some brands that you admire. Think about why you admire them and use that to factor into your process as you go through this. The second piece of this is to explore. So you want to research some basic design principles and understand the meaning behind certain colors, styles, typographies. Believe it or not, you guys, there is an absolute science behind color theory and design theory. This was something that I was not familiar with until just a couple of years ago, and it blew my mind. There are absolute meanings and emotional responses to the types of colors and fonts and typography that you use. You may not even recognize it on the surface, but subconsciously those colors will create a different emotion and response to something. So take a look at that and make sure that you factor that in as part of your process. I've also included a couple of sites here that we love, Dribble, Behance, and Brand New, that really showcase innovative and new design work that's been developed over the recent months, and it gives you some really great inspiration and ideas for design trends. So next, after you discover and explore, you want to design and figure out, with all of this data that you've got, really sketch out a few ideas and figure out what you think would be ideal. Me personally, I can't draw to save my life. I'm not a very creative person in that regard, but I can absolutely try to explain to someone what my vision is. And so me sitting down with someone who has the graphic design skills to pull that together is really, really key. If you don't have those types of resources at your disposal, or if you happen to be on a super, super tight budget, you can absolutely do this for very low cost. There's a couple different resources here, Vector, Inkscape, and Taylor Brands. I've personally used Taylor Brands before. It's fantastic. Fun fact, we developed the Flourish logo using Taylor Brands. And that was a little over 3.5 years ago, and it still stands and we still love it. I think I paid $12 for it. So just know that there are a lot of flexible options out there for you. Next, you want to refine. So once you have that logo kind of determined and you've got those images laid out, you want to think about, where will this be used? Is it scalable? Is it easy to read? Is it evocative? Does it instill certain feelings and certain purposes behind it that people will get to understand easily? When you think about it being scalable, how will that design look on a business card, on a website, on letterhead, on packaging, on stickers? I mean, you name it. The list of where your logo can be demonstrated goes on and on and on. So you don't want to come up with something that's overly complicated or something that really needs to be explained every single time. If it's a very abstract mark that just doesn't really resonate within your space, and you're always having to explain, oh, well, our logo represents this and this and this, that's a barrier, guys. That's a barrier. So you want to make it easy for people to understand who you are and what your brand identity is actually representing. And then lastly, you want to define. So once you have a logo developed and you feel really good about how that can be easily scaled out, you want to think how that can be treated. And what this means is that you need to have a brand guideline established. So once you've got a logo developed, you then need to give parameters around, okay, we can't use it this way, we can't use it this way, we can't change up these colors, we can't stretch or skew it in any way. So you need to put some defined parameters around how that logo can and cannot be used. the last thing you want to do is develop a logo, put all of this work and effort into it, only for someone to use it in an incorrect way and completely screw up what your brand identity is supposed to look like. So that's where a brand guide or a style guide will come into play, which you can also get through some of those resources such as Vector, Inkscape, and Tailor Brands, or you can have a designer develop that for you. And that's something that can be a simple one-page document that just provides guidance around how your brand can be used. So I want to just reiterate this fact as well, kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, how your brand really needs to be able to scale and translate across multiple platforms. So you want to make sure, again, the logo design will work across a variety of platforms, from your website to print to t-shirts to swag bags, whatever it is. You need to make sure that it's able to be used across multiple platforms. You also want to pick a color palette that's complementary to the logo. So if you develop a logo that happens to be one shade of red, don't stick with just that one shade of red. You can lean on a variety of different free tools that are out there. Adobe Cooler is probably one of my favorites. They provide palette recommendations based on a select color that you choose. So for us, if we were to put in that turquoise blue of the Flourish tree that we love so much, Adobe Cooler is going to give us recommendations on what the best complementary palettes look like. That way we can use some complementary colors elsewhere. That way everything's not blue, but maybe it's blue with a little splash of pastel pink, or maybe it's our blue with a splash of beige. It just adds a little bit of variety to the logo, but complements that color. You also want to think about the typography, as I mentioned before. Come up with what your primary font is going to be, and then your secondary and tertiary typeface as well. So what you have on your website or in a printed piece of collateral, or even in social media graphics, you could have 1 to 3 different types of font that you use. So in that brand guide, once you develop that logo, you also want to determine what those select typefaces are and stick with those. That way you have brand consistency all over the place. You also want to put some parameters around what type of photography you use, if any. So if you decide to use a lot of stock photos with your initial business launch, think about photos that really have a very similar look and feel to them. That way they're just not all over the place. Another way where you can use the colors and your complementary colors, especially with photography, is through the use of gradients. So all of the photos that you use can have a light gradient over the top of it, which helps to complement your logo and just reinforce that look and feel. You also want to think about how your brand identity can translate down to illustrations. So, and this also kind of overlaps a bit with iconography. So if you're using icons on your website or in your collateral or in infographics, social media, you name it, keep in mind that that brand identity really needs to pull and translate over into those elements as well. Of course, it needs to translate across your website. So you want to think about what that user experience is with your brand and the user interface of the actual website and mobile user interface, just to make sure that that logo translates across the board. And then, of course, anytime that you're using any video or motion graphics, you want to also be very consistent with that logo and, carry that through any data visualization components that you might have if you're doing a presentation, or again, if that's in a rack card or, any sort of infographic or social media component, whatever it might be. Every single thing that you use to communicate on your company's behalf needs to be part of your brand. Very, very important. So I wanted to go ahead and just showcase a couple of examples, and I apologize if this color or this picture isn't as clear as I'd like it to be, but this is an example of how you can take a brand and carry it across multiple components. Now the look and feel here is very similar across the board with the different shapes of the orange, the beige, and then the black. But you can see even on the business cards how you have a slight variation in how that brand is translated, which is great. So everything doesn't look exactly the same, but in essence, everything will complement each other, which is exactly what you want. Here's another demonstration of how a very colorful brand is translated throughout multiple variations. This is very bright, this is very cheery, this is very fresh. There's a lot going on here, but The reason why they have a lot going on here is because this is a fashion company. It's actually a fashion consortium in South America that really brings people together. So they're really looking to be kind of trendy and fun and uplifting and vibrant because that's part of their brand tone. And so that needs to carry out through their logo design. Here's another one as well, design branding. You can see how they use the D as sort of that letter mark as part of their logo, but it also represents the actual design in design branding, which I love. And they've also created a little bit of a B out of that element as well. I like this too because they're able to use that standalone icon to supplement the actual name of the company. So if you can see in the upper left-hand corner on that coffee cup, it's just that D. So over time, what you eventually want to happen is that people don't need to see the design branding, right? They just see the icon, which is done through consistency and regular communication of that brand. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now, as I mentioned to you before, if you already have a brand and you already have a logo and you're thinking that you might need to refresh your brand, we've got a couple of things here that will bring that into your attention and let you know if you need to do that. So 10 signs that your brand is in desperate need of changing. So first things first, if your logo isn't flexible, meaning you can't scale it up, scale it down, as we talked about earlier, you probably need to refresh. If you've designed a logo that does not look good in digital marketing and it does not look good in print marketing and it's a variety of so many different colors that it's just really hard to translate that across different platforms, you probably need to refresh it. Also, if design matters more than the brand experience, you probably need to change that. And what I mean by that is, although design is an extremely important part of this process, if you lead with design versus lead with the brand experience, you are doing something wrong. Because what that's going to do is not allow the brand to resonate throughout to your audience the way that you need it to. Unfortunately, what it's going to do is it's going to complicate things, and people are going to be, questioning what this is about. They don't understand. It's just too much going on. So don't try to lead with something that's just so differentiated that it's just going to confuse your customers. Also, if your brand messaging isn't working, it's probably time to do a little bit of a refresh. If you're constantly finding that you have to explain yourself to people and go through your elevator pitch multiple times to people, that's not a good sign. So you want to think about updating and adjusting that messaging. That way it's very simplified, easy to understand, and will resonate well with your customers. Also, if your brand is visually inconsistent, if you go to your website and you go look at your business cards and you look at your letterhead and you look at, those t-shirts that you ordered last year and everything looks different, that is not good, guys. We're going to need to refresh that. So you want to have consistency. No matter where you look for your company and your brand, it needs to be very, very similar, if not complementary to each other based on the medium that you're promoting it on. If your packaging is outdated, that needs to be updated. If your brand identity looks like the competition that you're going after, you have got to change that, guys. You've got to stand out, be differentiated, and make sure that your customers know who you are and don't confuse you with anybody else. One thing that I really like about this is thinking about if your current brand doesn't reflect your values. So again, going back to what we talked about earlier, your values are super, super important, as they, in essence, is what your company believes in. So if those values and what you believe in as an organization does not come through in your brand identity, that's probably something that you're going to need to adjust. You follow too many design trends. Don't try to put all sorts of design components into one logo. It's just going to be overwhelming. If you've got 14 different colors, that's probably too much. If you've got, the company name, an icon, a tagline, a design, element that's going through the logo that's got this rainbow gradient on it, y'all, that is way too much going on. Okay, you've got to simplify it and make it easy to read, easy to understand, and not something that people have to really take a minute and kind of cock their head and digest a little bit. Also, if your brand is expanding, if you are building this brand in a very massive way, and you have multiple products and services that are sub-brands, you really need to think about that hierarchy and how you build that brand. That way it can scale up and it can scale down in a very easy way. And then also, if you don't have a brand style guide, you need to create one. A brand style guide is really going to be the guidance and your guiding light to all things design and how you actually implement that brand. So if you have somebody that is going to design your new website for you, guess what? They're going to ask you for a brand style guide. They're going to want to know what type of fonts you want to use, what type of complementary colors you want to use. They're going to need to get your logo in a variety of different variations and different types of formats. So you want to think about all of those different things, and those are elements that will go into your brand style guide. Really, really important. Okay, so now that you've got your brand identity figured out, what do you do with it? You want to promote it as much as you possibly can. So you want to make sure that you engage with your employees, your stakeholders, your board members, and anybody else that may have an influence over how your brand is represented. And we kind of talk about this a little bit down this list, but you want them to be brand ambassadors. So for my team at Flourish, I want to make sure that they all completely and 100% understand who we are, what we stand for, what our values are, what our company mission is, and how we roll. Bottom line, if they can't tell that story just as clearly as I can, I am doing something wrong. If my team is not an ambassador for our company and an ambassador for our brand in any discussion where that topic may arise, they don't have the tools they need to be successful. So this needs to be something that is communicated and is communicated often. You also want to promote your brand and tell your story. People want to know who you are, why you started, where you came from, what inspired you to go down this path of starting a business. That story, guys, believe it or not, is a really, really great way for people to connect with you. People love authenticity. They love truth. They love being able to establish a relationship with somebody. And even though you may never come face to face with that customer, being able to portray that story and resonate with somebody on an emotional level is going to create a connection that is much deeper than simply being transactional. So think about that. Also, you want to make it easy for people to find you. I know this sounds like a no-brainer, but you shouldn't hide how people can be able to engage with your brand. Don't hide your story or the about section. Don't hide your logo. Make it easy for people to be able to find you. Give new clients stickers. Put it on your website, of course. Come up with some swag that you can give away to people. Talk about the brand often. Create business cards that are beautiful. This is one thing that I think is often overlooked because of how digital our world is right now. But we invest a lot of money in our business cards. And I can confidently say that probably 98% of the people that I've ever given a business card to have stopped, looked and felt our business card and said, "Oh my God, these are beautiful. Where did you get these?" And they like them because we've invested a little bit more money in a higher quality paper, and it's smooth and it's rounded and it's embellished. And it's through a company that we use called Moo, M-O-O. They create absolutely beautiful business cards, but it's an impression. And the second somebody gets that and they feel it, they get a slight understanding for who we are as a company. We focus on high quality, we focus on good experience, good customer service, and that resonates and translates through our business card. You also want to develop a tribe. So in addition to creating your ambassadors and having your key stakeholders really be able to tell that story, you want other people to do that too. So I love it when brands really encourage their audience and their following on social media to take photos and use the hashtag for that particular company. I love that so much because it gets the customers talking about the company, which is such a great way to organically spread the message behind that brand. So develop a tribe, encourage people to want to rally behind who you are as an organization and give them a reason to do that. And then also too, in order to get your brand out there, collaborate with influencers or other strategic partners that can help elevate your message. So does it make sense for us as a marketing and strategic public relations firm to team up with maybe a local area nonprofit where we can give some pro bono time to help out that organization. We're a women-owned business, so we really try to fuel other women-owned businesses and really highlight local area women who are doing amazing things in our community. That's part of who we are. So we really look to align our brand with other organizations that also align with our values, our purpose, our mission. You get the point, right? Okay, so I just wanted to kind of showcase, just to kind of give you a little bit of inspiration, some of the most valuable brands that are out there. Disney, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Coca-Cola. I mean, they're all over the place. Apple, of course. So think about when you're developing your brand and your brand identity, think about these organizations and become inspired by them. Think about what is it about Apple that really makes you, that just creates a memorable experience for you. For me, I like to geek out when I get a new Apple product because their packaging is so beautiful. I think their packaging sometimes is more expensive than the actual product inside of it, but guess what? I get so excited, and that creates an experience for me unlike any other product that I open. And I will say, I have found a lot of different products that try to compete with that, but they have set the standard for what that experience looks like from a packaging perspective. If you think about Amazon or even Google or even Microsoft, this trickles down to customer service. One company that's not up here is GoDaddy, and I personally love interacting with GoDaddy. Their customer service is probably the best customer service out of any company that I've ever engaged with. And let me tell you, 9 times out of 10, when you call customer service, it's not for a positive thing, but they somehow turn it into a positive experience, which I just love so much. So that really sits at the core of who they are. And then same thing with Disney. If you think about Disney, if you've ever been to Disney World, you know that that brand is so powerful and so strong, and it's all about memorable experiences really for any age, which is such an amazing thing that they've been able to achieve. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, but they've done such a phenomenal job at that. So hopefully these companies will lead you with a little inspiration and just kind of help guide you down this path of creating your brand identity. And if you ever have any questions and you need some help with branding and building your brand and how to get that out there, you feel free just to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help, and we look forward to supporting you. Best of luck, guys, and hopefully you can tune in to our next podcast series, which will air in a couple of weeks. Talk to you guys later.